I'm so glad to be here today and not be wearing this cast. For the last 6 weeks almost, I had this thing on, and I tell you what, I learned a lot from it. And if some of you hadn't heard my story, how it happened, I just want to give you a quick recap. The very day before we went on a family trip to Switzerland, I went on a bike ride because I thought it'd be a good thing to get some exercise before getting on the plane. I ended up getting in a bike accident and breaking my arm the very day before we got on the plane. So this was a big deal because we were taking my father's ashes back to Switzerland. My wife's from there. So, I felt really bad about breaking my arm. I thought we were going to wreck the trip. By me maybe not being able to go. All these things went through my mind. Ultimately, I told myself and told my wife, I'm not going to let this ruin the trip. I can promise you that. And I'm generally a positive person, so I said to myself, I'm going to try to learn something from this. And what I learned, surprisingly, was I learned to become a better husband, and ultimately I learned about perspective. Probably wondering how a cast on my arm would make me a better husband. Well, I was in pain during the trip, first few weeks, and so all I could use, it was my right hand, I'm right-handed, so all I could use was my left hand to eat, to shave, to dress, everything. And it was difficult and challenging, and one of the challenging things I experienced was the constant jokingly banter from my wife, who's left-handed. So we would have this dialogue, and I would basically put it off and say that it's not about being left-handed or right-handed, it's my dominant arm. That's why I'm having difficulty. Well, one day I was driving down the road to St. Louis. I travel a lot. You get 4 hours in the car, you have a lot of time to think. I went over to get some gas, and when I started the car back up, being in a cast, left-handed, can't rotate, in order to start my car, I have to go underneath the steering column and turn it on with my left hand. Now, I know this is an extreme example, but it did dawn on me that my wife might be right. There is something to everything being catered to right-handed people. So I was thinking, as I was driving along, giving it more and more thought, I decided to give my wife a call. I go, maybe this is a way I can turn a positive out of this whole cast situation. So I called her up and I said, you know what? Let's talk about the difficulties you have being a left-hander. And when I get home, let's talk about all the utensils and things like that you've mentioned are made for right-handed people, and I've neglected to acknowledge it. So I did say though, I said, you can leave the scissors out of it. I remember from being a little kid, and if everybody here can remember, there was little green-handed scissors for left-handed people. And I remember that. I'm like, okay, I get the scissors, but let's talk about other things. And we did. When I got home, the first thing she brought out was the butter knife. Now, the butter knife has been a dispute item for a long time because I like to set it out with a butter dish. My wife claims it's made for right-handed people, and I'm like, well, butter is soft. It doesn't matter. You can cut it this way or not. And she's like, well, if you look at it and use it correctly, it is curved along this bottom edge, and it's beveled back so that when you cut it, you can serve yourself butter. I said, okay, you can't do it this way. So I'll give you that. Then she brought out this. I'm like, oh, that's that awesome spatula that never gets used. We got it as a gift. So she took it out and she's like, see this edge on here that's used for cutting? If you're right-handed, it works because you cut and then serve yourself. You turn it over, it doesn't cut on there, and you can't serve yourself. So we went on and talked about can openers, ice cream scoopers, and everything else. And I essentially came to the realization after all this that I am going to learn something from this because it was an example of me over the years not really acknowledging her difficulties or challenges from being left-handed. And I think one of the reasons I didn't acknowledge them is my mom was left-handed. So I've been hearing this my whole life and really didn't care. But but what it really did help me to be a better husband in regard to, it opened my mind to being open to my wife's perspective and being more understanding to what she's saying and acknowledge it. Then the bigger thing happened, and I kind of would call it an aha moment, and I thought, this is actually all about perspective. And that's the biggest lesson I learned from that. You know, wearing that cast, after I realized this, was a daily reminder about perspective, and that each one's perspective isn't necessarily wrong, but it's just another perspective. So what I would hope that everybody learns from me today is that you don't have to go out and break your arm to learn that there are other points of view and perspectives and to be more understanding to them. Thank you.